We floated Alberta's Bow River with one of the Bow's long-serving great guides, Terry Johnson of Fishtails Fly Shop. While understated, Terry's extremely knowledgeable, consistent, kind, generous, and hardworking. This episode of The Bank is all about nymphing the Bow River, the basic setup and tactics. So let's get out of Terry's way and let him show us how to be successful.
Okay, so nymphing, I typically like a longer rod, a 9.5 or a 10-foot rod. Just because it's easier. You've got a little more leverage to mend the line when you're fishing, picking it up, and we're typically using a longer leader too, so to get that leader out of the water, the longer rod helps a lot. So floating line, and then I'll use an indicator. There's a bunch of different sizes. I like the big one just because I can see it. These are the new airlock ones that you twist off and twist on. It doesn't kink up the line. And instead of running a straight leader, using a 3X or a 2X leader, I just go straight mono off the end of my fly line down to the swivel, because this thinner line just cuts through the water a lot quicker than a thick butted leader does, and I find it just gets down deeper quicker. I'll go about 6-7 feet to a swivel, and I've been using this swivel lately just because I can hang a tag off of it, and it just allows that fly to swing nice and natural. So I use a swivel now. I'll use heavy line. This is up here, this is 20-pound line to the swivel, which just allows me to add a tag fly off quite easily. I'll use lighter line, like 12-pound off that swivel to my first dropper, and then I'll go down about 12 inches, 18 inches depending on the depth of the water, to my first heavy fly, and that's typically a San Juan worm. It's got some weight to it. I don't add any external weight. You got to get it down on the bottom, so either you're using a heavy wire worm or some kind of split shot to get you down. I just like this because it's doing two things. It's getting me down, and it's also you'll catch quite a few fish on it. And then off the bend of that, another 18 inches, I'll have a third fly that'll drop, and I try and tie all these flies on those loops just so they have a little bit more movement when they're in the water. They don't look as stiff going down through the water. And then my last fly, this leech has been great this spring. The peacock leech and also Aaron's seal leech have been a great fly. If there's a hatch going on, obviously we're going to add something to imitate the hatch, whether it's a caddis pupa emerger or whatever it is, small nymphs. But the last couple of weeks there's been no bug activity really. You can throw on a prince nymph and you'll catch fish, but they've definitely been on the leeches and the worms. So I've got a chenille worm up top, which is very effective, and then that's my weight getting them down. And I'll change them around. Sometimes I'll put the chenille at the bottom and the leech up top, depending. And you can change it up. I used to go, tie this worm on the top, and then off the bend 18 inches to my second fly, off the bend 18 inches to the third fly. The other day I had the weight on the bottom with 2 tags up top, just so that's my weight getting it down to the very bottom and aerating the smaller stuff. So those 2 tags, they hang off that, they move around a little more, I find, when you have the tags. And years ago I didn't do it. I just find this works better, so you kind of stick with what's working. So that's what I've been using lately, is a swivel, heavier line up top, and then lighter as you go down to the worm. I think that's 15-pound. I know it sounds heavy, but the fish they're not going to be leader shy when they're eating these big flies. And it sure helps when you got the bottom, you can pull the bottom off pretty easy with this heavier stuff. And there's some big fish in the river, and you don't have to worry about losing those big fish on 4X tippet if you're using that as your dropper material. This is 12-pound, my last one, so I know if those guys got that fish on, I don't have to worry that they're going to break it off really easy. It's going to have to be a pretty big fish or a pretty big screw up to lose the fish. So that's my nymph rig, and I'll change it up depending on water conditions, but typically that's what I run. Full length. If the water's deeper, I'll go about 9 feet to the first fly, and then another 1.5 feet. So it's a long leader. That's why the long rod really helps. But if it's shorter or shallower water, like right now the water's a little shallower, I'll shorten it up. But typically we'll keep it long because we're always going through shallow and deep and shallow and deep, and you really want to get into the deep spots. That's where the fish are. So we'll keep the leader long for people that are fishing, just so they're getting down into the, instead of sliding the indicator up and down, we'll keep it long, so we're making sure we get it down. So we've got a perfect spot here where this shallow water drops off into a nice deep bucket here. That's where they're going to be hanging, on that ledge and in that bucket, in that deeper water down there. So I'm going to start in close, just start in case there's fish right in front of me here. I'll just do some short casts right in front and then work my way out. Eventually I'm going to work right across this seam over into that far edge over there, and just get those flies. I'm casting upstream, trying to get those flies to sink and drop over that ledge. I don't want to throw it too far up or I'm just going to hook bottom, especially with all these weeds. So I'm using, because I've got this long leader and these 3 hooks, I'm using my back cast to load up the water. I'm letting it hit the water on the back cast so it loads it up. It'll just cast a lot better. Instead of trying to cast these 3 hooks in the air, letting it hit the back water on the back cast and then throwing it up.
A lot less chance for them to tangle too, right?
Yes,
Because you're keeping it straight.
So I'm just trying to get that indicator to drift as natural as I can. If it's dragging at all, I'm going to mend the line, but if I get a good drift, I'm just going to keep it going as long as I can down into the deeper water and hit anything that moves that indicator. It's only going to stop for 2 things. It's either the bottom or a fish. So if it's a fish, you want to get it tight. If it's the bottom, you want to get it off the bottom. Throw a mend in there. Follow it down with my rod tip, just a little bit of slack. So if something hits it, I can lift it up